Hey guys, welcome back. So now we're jumping back into Thor, where the mystery of the missing dead continues. And as we get closer to finding the cause of this anomaly, we're inching closer to learning more about the Black Infinity Stone, as well as what may be the future death of Thor at the hand of Thanos. So with that said, let's get into it. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week. And don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so when we jump back in, we pick up from just after Thor and Runa caught up with Corvus Glaive and rescued Thor's little sister Lausa, just before she was used to open the final door that had been locked by Bor's magic ever since the days of the original Valkyries. But with Thor coming this far, even though he had already saved Lausa, he couldn't help but to open the door himself to see what's inside. But also at the time, we had seen that there was a little magically warped beetle that had been following Thor, which made its way back to Dr. Doom to report Thor's progression into this vault that has been locked away, sealed with ancient blood magic tied to Bor. And that let us know that whatever's in here, it has Doom's attention. But with Thor opening this doorway, he makes his way right inside, even with Odin telling him that he's in excruciating pain. And inside, we're told that Thor sees all of history unfolding before his eyes. Everything that has happened or will happen, from the beginning to the end, visible to him all at once in the clouds. And for Thor, we're told, much like his grandfather Bor, Thor also finds the weight of eternity too heavy to bear. But then at a moment's notice, Thor is then met by the future version of his younger sister, Lausa, who is supposed to show up here and give Thor a message, very mysterious-like, and then disappear. But when she gets here, things don't go as planned, because there's a bit of conversation when she arrives, with her telling Thor not to stare into the time storm, which from there has Thor asking all kind of questions, not only about the time storm, but also about Lausa, as far as why she's here, why she's older, and what exactly does she mean about this time storm. But in response, all Lausa really tells Thor is that with staring into the time storm, he's frying his mind, to where from there she then lets him know that she's going back, and as she leaves, she tells Thor to check on your dead, which is a really cryptic thing to say, so of course Thor is like, well, what does that mean? And as she's leaving, Lausa tells him that she doesn't know, but he told her that he would know what that means. But I gotta say, even with this happening briefly and future Lausa showing up and then going on her way, I find it pretty interesting that now we see future Lausa with Corvus's glaive. Because when present day Lausa saw her future in the reflection, Corvus was still off to the side holding his glaive, or at least that's how it appeared to be. But also it had me thinking that this may be one of those things where we see the present events change the course of the future. Because when present day baby Lausa picked up Corvus's glaive in the previous issue, she picked it up, but also she saw a woman, hidden and quiet, without a wink of fear, which sounds a lot like how present day Lausa has been described since issue 29. So I wouldn't be surprised if we saw some more of future Lausa doing time traveling to the present later in this series, because it really seems like there's been seeds planted for it. But then after this, we make our way to Valhalla, which has been long deserted. And for those who are just jumping in, this is something that we discovered back in Legacy issue 750, right after Odin's funeral, when Odin explained to Thor that he had to go into the hammer since he couldn't go to Valhalla. And ever since, it's been the lingering mystery. But we find that Thor has asked Jane to meet him here, and when she does, she initially greets Thor by telling him that she'd only been gone for a fortnight, and he's already managed to have misplaced everyone in Valhalla. And with her saying this, on one hand, I'm kinda like, well, you could've just said 2 weeks. But then also, we notice rather quickly that it switches up a bit when she then goes back and forth with Odin for a brief moment, to where then she's like, okay, yeah, I'm a Valkyrie, and Valkyries are supposed to protect Valhalla, because sure, when warriors die, they're promised Valhalla as their reward, with eternal rest under the protection of Asgard. But again, that protection from Asgard is coming from the Valkyries, and the accountability falls on the Valkyries before Asgard's king. But really at this point, there's no time for just pointing fingers, because there are a number of substantial questions that need to be answered, like how to get these people back, or is it possible to get them back? But also Jane tells Thor that it's been brought to her attention that with everyone missing from Valhalla, it's brought a profound emptiness, and for that reason, Valhalla is now dying with no one there. But from here, they then leave and make their way back to Asgard to form a plan and go after whoever did this. But when they get to Asgard, Thor tells Jane that he needs to fill her in on some things, with one of those things being that they're under attack. And with Jane hearing this and seeing that the Bifrost is broken, she thinks this is what Thor's talking about, but he quickly tells her that not too long ago when he was a Hulk, things got a little crazy and Thor smashed. But that's a whole nother story in itself, and I got that link below if you need to get caught up on Banner of War. But with Thor continuing to tell Jane what he does know, as far as them being under attack, that's really all that he knows, because he doesn't know who the enemy is, let alone how they mean to destroy him. And as it stands, Odin, Runa, and even baby Lausa know more than him, and she's a toddler. But Thor also goes on to tell Jane that future Lausa told him to check on the dead, which is why he went to Valhalla, but only to see that they weren't there. But this then leads Thor to telling Jane that the rational next step is to check on the goddess of the dead. So then it's here where he calls for his goats, Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Grinder, and they all make their way to hell. But when they get there, it's hella empty, hella broken, and speaking of hella, she's nowhere to be found. But with seeing this, it lets them know that the issue of the missing dead is reaching far beyond Valhalla, because hell is empty too. But also the unexpected problem in hell is these huge Val Ravens that have pretty much taken over the place, who used to be a lot smaller, and back at the beginning of time, they would feed on the flesh and souls of those fallen in the first battle, long before nature was truly established. And from then till now, they just been eating and growing. And prior to now, Hela had them chained up here on the outskirts to keep them out of hell proper, for obvious reasons, but now with no one to keep them in check, they're just out here eating anyone they can get their hands on. But with Thor, Valkyrie, and Odin getting here, Jane and Thor try to sneak around to investigate without really bothering the Val Ravens, and they search every mile of hell with the help of Thor's Ravens, which used to be Odin's Ravens. But in their search they find nothing, not even the bodies of Hela or Karnilla. But the whole time that they're here, the Val Ravens have been singing these melancholic songs, which at one point get very specific about Odin, and even so much to the point where he's like he's had enough. So he goes with the hammer and booms one of these Val Ravens in the head, which from there pretty much forces Thor and Jane to get involved. And when they do, like Odin, he's just beating the mess out of one of these things, hammering this Val Raven in the head for a while. But also at the same time, we see more of the conflict between Thor and Odin, where Odin wants to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. But now that Thor is king and Odin's technically dead, but nonetheless Odin is still not compliant to the king of Asgard. And because of that, we still see a lot of Odin just doing what he wants to do. But when Thor jumps in to stop Odin from just jackhammering this Val Raven, the other one comes up behind Thor and he lifts his little foot, or his claw, it's a raven, and Thor just looks back at him like, don't do it, don't you dare. But that Val Raven, he dares, and he just stomps on Thor, which is just beyond disrespectful. But then Jane jumps in and she tries to get back to the task at hand by asking the Val Ravens where their queens are and where are the dead. But in response, they're more or less just like, it don't matter where they are, we run it. We're the rulers of hell now. And it's when they say this when Thor is just like, you know what? I've had enough. So he takes to the skies and he reminds them by lighting hell the hell up that he is the king of Asgard and the Lord of the Realms. And in a lot of ways it feels like Thor is doing this because of the disrespect that he's been getting from the moment he got here. And for the Val Ravens, with them seeing this, they're just like, you know what, you right? Because they don't want none of that, not even a little bit. And with them calmed down and ready to talk, Thor's ready to ask questions. But before he can get started, Nidhogg just pops up, which surprises Thor because Nidhogg, the mightiest dragon in hell, is supposed to be gone. Because I'm pretty sure the last time that we saw him was one of the earlier issues of Thor Volume 5, back when Queen Sindra split his wig, literally. But now that he's back with a number of peculiar modifications, it now begs the question of not only how did this happen, but also who's behind it. But with Nidhogg crashing the party, Thor asks Jane to use her sight and tell him what she sees. But when Jane looks into the dragon, she's not really sure what she's looking at. He has no soul, he's not actually alive, and whatever's beating in his chest, it's not a heart. But this tussle between Thor and Nidhogg, it doesn't last too long when Thor throws a hammer and Nidhogg eats it, which is then quickly followed by Thor calling the hammer back, which is messy, per usual. But after this, Nidhogg just more or less runs away, leaving the others with just more questions rather than anything else. But then it's after this where we head over to somebody who has quite a few answers, over in good old Latveria, and that person would be none other than Dr. Doom. And it's here when we jump over to Doom, where he's talking to someone off panel, of whom we'll get to shortly. But it's here where we see Doom mentioning that this isn't the beginning of the end, but rather they're somewhere closer to the middle of the end. And he mentions that the problem with humanity is that they don't have the attention span for Armageddon, because it simply takes too long. To where then we see Doom holding the soul of some poor guy named Oliver within a round bottom flask. And all we're really told about Oliver is that he died in his car trying to outrun some flames, but he didn't make it. And Doom just goes on to say that Oliver was a casualty of the end of the world. But then at a moment's notice, we find out who Doom's talking to, and it's Hela. Which on the surface, it does look like Doom is the bad guy, and he might be, but also sometimes Doom has these moments where he's actually the lesser of two evils. And we may come to find out that that's the case, because from what we're shown, Doom's definitely doing some experimenting. And from the looks of his current experiment, I wouldn't doubt that he has something to do with Nidhogg coming back. But only time will tell what exactly Doom is so patiently doing. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/Dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.